So good morning, everybody, and good evening to those who are in Hong Kong or in Asian time zone. This presentation will be delivered by my good friend, Dr. Lan-sze Pang. She is the director of the only Side D program in counseling psychology in Hong Kong. And she is one of the crucial figures in developing the field of counseling psychology in Hong Kong. So let's welcome Dr. Lan-sze Pang. She will talk about how the crisis, COVID-19 and the Zoom thing, everything, that how does all this crisis change counseling? And would this challenge last forever? And how could we modify and how could we cope with this challenge? So thank you. Now is the time for Dr. Lan-sze Pang. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you via Zoom here in hopefully for many of you also to attend a conference at the current time, even at a longer time. So I would like to start with some engagement with participants, even though I don't see you, but you see me, right? But let's see and just take a few moments and imagine, okay, this is your typical day of practice that you are at home, okay, sitting in front of your laptop or your computer 6 to 7 hours with back-to-back virtual appointments with your clients and your supervisees, and conducting psychotherapy courses on the internet and facilitating counseling role-play practice in the breakout rooms. Not only that, okay, virtual practice is the predominant service that you're providing, and in-person counseling is peripheral to your professional life. I wonder when I was reading this, what kind of feelings generated within you? Do you feel familiar? Or do you feel a bit distant? How is it like for you if you are in the same position as me, as a practitioner, as a clinical supervisor, even an educator in your program? If you have asked me this question to imagine this scenario, I probably couldn't have much vivid picture in my head. I would definitely say, well, it may not be in my lifetime to do everything online, including my teaching, supervision, seeing clients. Maybe, you know, after I passed, okay, away, okay. But you know what? It's changed, okay, this semester. You know, video conferencing is my major mode of my, not just the counseling service delivery, but in my teaching delivery and my supervision delivery. In the past 3.5 months, since early February till May, we just ended the online mode of teaching supervision like last week. So what kind of feelings have you experienced? You know, I think it's kind of surreal to me, even when I reflect on that for 3.5 months, okay? I'm living a professional life like this scenario. And this prompted me to have a lot of reflection in the past 3.5 months. And I would like to take this opportunity to present to you all, and maybe using this opportunity to organize some of my reflection to hopefully to bring some insights and contribution to our discipline. But I would like to, first of all, bring to all of us the awareness that the profession of psychotherapy has its own culture. Okay, it itself is a culture. That's why it has its own ethical traditions, rituals, values, and even has its own language. And this culture has been quite solid and well built for many decades until at the beginning of this year, something happened to this culture of psychotherapy. This pandemic crisis encountered this culture of psychotherapy and confronted our tradition and rituals of counseling practice and also its training. Not only that, this crisis has interrupted the continuity of our taken for granted body-to-body therapeutic interaction with our clients. And most importantly, has shaken our sense of control in our familiar approaches to counseling practice and training. So let's take a look at these two pictures on the left and on the right and see which one you feel more familiar to you. And when you see this picture on the left, what kind of feelings, well, what words would you describe versus the picture on your right? What kind of feelings do you have and what kind of words could you come up with when you see that? As a practitioner, okay, or went through the traditional approach to counseling psychology training, the left side of the picture is the most familiar approach to conduct group counseling. It's a circle, group members and the group facilitators sit together, okay? And there's a reason for that, why group counseling conducted in a circle. I still remember when I was in graduate school, my supervisors share with us, there's a reason to conduct group in this way, okay? Because it has a symbolic meaning that is a container to contain every group members, including group facilitators, feelings, thoughts, and lived experience in a safe and accepting way. And there's a lot of dynamics when we learn about how to conduct group counseling from this kind of circle setting. You can, just imagine, if you're familiar with how to conduct group counseling, you can see that, oh, there's probably certain member talking with the person next to them, but not across from them. And you can see different facial expression. And apparently those three on the left, the elder person and the man, seem to be kind of, from their nonverbal behavior, seem to be more like isolated and have definitely some feelings toward what's going on in the group. That's how we train and teach even our students how to conduct process-oriented group counseling. However, since early February, when the crisis came to Hong Kong, I think we were the first region, okay, one of those, okay, being hit by this crisis at the earliest stage, okay? So actually, around the late January, the university has decided to close down, okay, in order to minimize contact of people for the risk of infection. So within that Chinese New Year break, we were in the Chinese New Year, actually. I, including my colleagues who are clinical supervisors as well, have to literally, okay, migrate the whole training, supervision, and how our students being able to continue with their Paracom with the online format and to generate a lot of regulations, guidelines, not just for students, even for our programs as well. And this is on the right, how we and our students have to conduct group counseling on the screen in a two-dimensional format, and see how it feels for you. And on the right, this is how we experienced in the past 3.5 months doing group supervision. And it definitely challenged not just our students, but as supervisors, how to teach group dynamics that we have learned from our traditional approach to conduct group in a three-dimensional format. Look at the screen, right? Even though everybody is looking at the screen, but you don't see the three-dimensional aspect to look at the dynamic, because a lot of them you only see the facial expression, but what about the other parts of the body that we often are trained to observe? And the more we use this two-dimensional format to conduct group counseling, we learn, okay, from our experience that, the sequence of these boxes, let's call it boxes, actually show up differently in different types of devices. Okay, you may see this combination of people on the screen, but on your device, it may look differently. So if you and I are conducting group together as co-facilitators, what I observe may be different from you, and how that may affect, a more cohesive way of running the group together. So this is something that has been challenging us throughout this couple of months. What about individual counseling? Isn't it easier? Well, okay, when only there's two people all together. I would also like to present these two pictures and let you see how it is done in our three-dimensional way and how it is done right now in a two-dimensional way on the screen. What kind of feelings do you get when you're looking at the picture on the left and on the right? Do you feel or see any differences when it's conduct body to body versus when two people side by side? This is actually a gallery screen. Now, if you click a speaker screen, it will be very different. Like, you only see the counselor talking, and then when the client talks, you don't see the counselor next to the client. So this is how it works visually, but the process has become quite different, and definitely kind of bring us some culture shock about how conducting group or individual counseling may related to the disembodied interactions between the therapist and the clients. First of all, McLachlan, okay, in 2004 actually talked about embodiment and clinical work, not necessarily talking about computer technology, but as a whole. But he actually connect human and computer technology in the clinical setting, like using a prosthetic device. I think this has some connotation for us using computer technology, for example, laptop or computer, to assist us to do counseling. It's a prosthetic device. Usually it's used for people with disability. So I found it very interesting. He termed it this way. And how is it related to the sense of disembodiment in the interaction between clients and therapists, between supervisee and supervisors? The space is now mediated, okay, with a very concrete thing in front of us. In counseling, we have our own language, as I say, it's a culture. In supervision, or sometimes when client or when therapists talk about how they feel about that dynamic with their client, sometimes they will say, oh, I feel there's a wall between us, or sometimes we may use it in our casual conversation. But seems right now the wall is real. The wall is legitimized, okay, because of online counseling. So it seems there's a loss of body-to-body interaction and even regulation. We human beings actually, through body-to-body interaction, regulate our whole body movement, our pace, through looking, through observing the other party, movement. Okay, this is how we learn how to interact and how to relate to each other. What if you got only see half part of the body instead of full body of the individual? And that's a really experiential understanding of eye-to-eye contact on a two-dimensional format of online counseling. In counseling training and also in multicultural counseling training, there's a lot of emphasis about eye contact and how to make appropriate eye contact with our client. And even in multicultural counseling literature, there's research and scholarly article talking about cultural differences in terms of making eye contact with people, okay? But what about on the two-dimensional aspect when there's, the counseling is done on the screen versus the three-dimensional aspect? Look at the picture on the right. You see 4 people. Let's imagine this is a group counseling, right, with 4 people here. Can you guess which one is looking at the group facilitator? Let's take a guess. Let's say that the one on the left, the female is the group facilitator. Can she guess which one is looking at her? Can she locate the gaze? It's hard, right? Even though it seems they're looking at the camera, but does it mean that they are all making eye contact to each other for their interaction? In real setting during these past few months, I and my student have been learning how to make eye contact qualitatively different than doing body-to-body counseling work. And another observation that myself and other practitioners who have done some online counseling in the past would be, there's a mirror effect. That means when you are conducting counseling, right, if it is in the three-dimensional aspect, you don't get to see yourself. You don't get to see your face, right? But in the counseling on the screen, you and your client actually can see yourself from the screen. So sometimes it can be very self-conscious for both parties and lost track of the process element in the counseling process. I think if we just talk, it's fine, but what if we have to do more deeper psychological process that require a lot of this secure feeling, acceptance, and sometimes eye contact plays a role. And it seems it's a little bit different. I may not say that it's challenging, it's different than how it's done, in a three-dimensional aspect. And there's also distance from the screen. I think in the past few months, I and my students have been taking a lot more experimental approach, like just try to experiment. What is the comfortable distance that generating the warm and respectful distance for the client? I mean, counseling is a very unique kind of relationship. I think the literature about the social distance, right, is between the acquaintance and the intimate relationship. We are somewhere in between. So we cannot sit too far away. That is more like social acquaintance kind of relationship, but definitely not too close like it's an intimate relationship. So in a three-dimensional aspect, we can do that body-to-body regulation. We can sense that, well, if I sit back, that means it's too close, and then I can move that. Okay, we can estimate this distance in a more real way. I'm not saying that it's not real in the online, but it's a different kind of reality. But when we are doing the online counseling, I found that it takes a lot of experimentation to see how much do I and also my client have to see each other. Okay, from my experience with my supervisee, actually it is very interesting. We tend to feel less safe, okay, when we only see really little part of another person's body. For example, if you only see me, just the head, somehow your body will react feeling that it's not safe. And I've gotten this from my supervision work with my supervisee. Because you don't see a lot of all this non-verbal behavior, and you just, if it is a opposite sex therapeutic relationship, sometimes that kind of gender dynamics may appear if either party just only see a very little part of the full body. So this is something I think we only get to experience and observe in a two-dimensional aspect of counseling work. So sometimes too close or too distant. This is something that we're still exploring during these few months. And because of that, just mentioned, okay, there will be some multicultural nuances that I found happen on the virtual setting. So I'm going to share some of the observations in the past few months. The first thing is about the generational issues. It has been quite prominent, actually, probably more than I expected. Because it's not affecting practitioner, okay? What I'm sharing is, it's affecting how the training program runs when we have to abruptly switch to online practicum work for our students. It definitely challenges the existing culture of counseling training. Academic programs in clinical and counseling psychology has been focused on body-to-body counseling work, okay? And even APA, okay? If you have to, accumulate all these hours recognized for going for a pre-doctoral internship, for example, only body-to-body counseling work count, okay? Only, I think, when around March or early April, I've noticed that because of the COVID-19, okay, getting more severe in the States, then APA also had to make a ad hoc decision to kind of adjust whether to allow online counseling work, okay, for the practicum students. Even for our program also as well, it's definitely affecting us, okay? How much competence our students can provide online counseling services to their clients, and what kind of resources and training can be provided for them. And one of the general issue is about, we are getting the younger cohort coming into the program every year. The younger generation of counseling trainees and even their clients who grow up with the virtual environment have a very different experience, different beliefs and attitudes toward using computer technology for this kind of psychotherapy work. And sometimes it has some generational conflicts as well. I think this is something that probably may contribute to the multicultural counseling literature, which again, okay, our culture has been constructed within the body-to-body interaction. Our theory also has been. So when this new generation who brought up with virtual environment, electronic devices nowadays, okay, babies, sometimes if they are away from their mother, primary caregiver, they can still connect with their mother through their mobile phone, right? Okay, online, see their mother through the mobile phone, even during the quarantine period. So this is a very unique culture, how we build attachment with primary caregiver now through online, okay? The traditional attachment theory is body to body, okay? So it adds something to us to really ponder and to reflect upon. Another multicultural nuances is about ethnic and vocational identity expressed through the two-dimensional context. In the traditional way, client come to the therapist's office, supervisor come to supervisor's office. The office usually is constructed as a way to convey a more neutral setting, okay? The counselor has control over, okay, what is included in the actual counseling room. But in video conferencing, okay, your client or your supervisee will have their own private space, and how they actually display their background is very individually different. We see a lot more cultural authenticity, either consciously or unconsciously, through where they chose to receive counseling. And sometimes even people feel more comfortable to show the ethnic part, the cultural part in what they wear, in the corner they would like to show to their therapist or to their supervisor. And definitely there's also workplace code switching. And when we were trying to help our students to have a shift from in-person counseling to online counseling, there's a lot of adjustment for our students to feel comfortable and psychologically ready enough to conduct professional counseling. I'm going to talk about that in the later section, but this workplace code switching is definitely a phenomenon, not just for students, for a supervisor, right? How I present myself in my office and in my own private space at home. I definitely actually experienced that code switching as well. How I dress, how I try to dress, sometimes I try to say, oh, if you feel that, how to help yourself to transit this, having this professional hat with you at home, having this psychological boundary, you may want to dress like a professional, like how you see client in person. But I found it's very difficult when you have to do this almost every single day for 2.5 months, wearing how you work clothes at home. So this is something I've been reflecting on a lot myself. Another multicultural nuances I would like to bring us, and it really hit on me a lot, is the social class nuances. It's very contextualized, so it's very specific to Hong Kong. Before the COVID-19, as also when I was in the States, okay, I knew colleagues, doing therapy at their home, okay, have their home office to do therapy. Okay, I thought, wow, this is really nice, actually, to be able to have your home to kind of renovate it, have a private practice office. But after COVID-19 came, and we have, to have a private space to do counseling work that require privacy and confidentiality, is definitely a luxury for my students and even for their clients. Then I realized that for people who are able to have their private practice at home, it's because the space definitely plays a role, more spacious. And I found that actually they do have an extra office, extra living room that allow them to have a really clear physical boundary. Only client can even go through a certain entrance to get to this renovated living room practice office. They don't get to cross the boundary to go to the living room that belongs to the therapist's professional life. But when we are actually, transiting to the online format this semester in early February, it's not an easy task. It's not just about technological matter. It's about even helping and discuss with our students how to identify an appropriate enough private space for them to conduct counseling and to have supervision with me. This is such a luxury. And a lot of students and clients have to do it in the bedroom, but they have to move something so that the bed is not seen. And particularly, it's very challenging during the quarantine period. The government, actually recommended us everybody stay home and work from home. So 24 hours, family members are in the home. There's, how to find the time there's no family member, but there's private enough for our student to conduct counseling when their family member may be just next door. When I say next door, it's really next door. It's like really short distance. I think there's a lot of new learning experience and a acculturation process for both myself as a supervisor, how to support my supervisee, and also help them to support their client, how to find appropriate private space and not to neglecting their needs for counseling service. And also another issue, the social cultural nuance of the background that the client show and the therapist show. Because now we are not in the same well-controlled room, okay? It is our own space. Oftentimes it's our home, a corner of our home. And it's a luxury to, you can see that it's a white background. It's supposed to be, according to HIPAA, in the States, actually, psychologists, okay, if they want to provide online counseling before COVID-19, they are encouraged to have this kind of background. But it's a luxury. I have to come to my office today in order to have this kind of background. Okay, I don't have this kind of setting, at my home. Okay, so there's a lot of hierarchical connotation that convey from looking at the background. I definitely see the social class, like whether the client's SES. They have to squeeze or, have to find a really crowded place. You can see their bed, have they do it on the bed because they need the surveys, or even our students, you can definitely see the SES nuances through their surroundings, which is very hard to so-called to avoid, okay? And how that may in some way change the dynamic between the therapist and client. As you say, we try oftentimes in the more contemporary approach to counseling, we try to have that equality. That's why in the group counseling, the picture you saw, everybody sit on the same kind of chair. The group facilitator will not sit a different chair to show that they are, okay, in this kind of state, have that equality. So what about when you are in the two-dimensional aspect? You cannot really match that, okay? Not even with the virtual background, the Zoom approach, Zoom provide. I will talk about that later. So for Hong Kong context, definitely there's a culture-specific dilemma of boundary issues. The personal and professional circle intertwine closely during these 3.5 months for myself and the trainees. And how to use our knowledge and even wisdom to negotiate, to manage the boundary issue. Much, much more challenging than body-to-body counseling work. Well, Hong Kong is an international city, but until we have to altogether switch to online services, online classes, and online supervision, access to secure and stable internet also is a luxury for many students. Some of them, they don't have it. How they can sometimes they may even have to, during those times, they feel comfortable, they may have to come to campus to seek approval to use the university internet in order to provide online services to a client. And what if our client do not have such access? And because of the quarantine and the lockdown, they cannot even come, I don't feel comfortable come to receive in-person services. So this is something is still ongoing, and we are still, facing this kind of challenges, how to make ethical and appropriate clinical decision that benefit our clients, but at the same time that our therapists also are taken care of too. Another issue that come up with the virtual counseling, okay, the elephant in the room, we're familiar with that, and how the elephant in the room is present a different scenario in virtual counseling. Okay, we often talk about the elephant in the room and the in-person counseling, but I see very different presentation while we are doing it online through Zoom in particular. There's some kind of oblivious that I myself and other professionals who have done some online counseling before have noticed. Let me give you an example. Virtual background. Zoom provides, virtual background. If you feel that, your setting is not appropriate, okay, to have that review, okay, on the screen, then you can choose different kind of pictures. And because this is so new, okay, to us, so a lot of time, including therapists and clients, have never thought about the underlying meaning, okay, behind selecting a certain kind of virtual background. Or what if when you're doing counseling, our clients have a pet at home, and then suddenly a pet just walk across the screen behind or in front of the client. What would you do as a therapist? Would you bring it up, or would you just let it go? Because in the in-person count, usually, the door is closed. You rarely have this kind of distraction or interruption. Even the virtual background sometimes can interrupt, okay? Unless you make a conscious choice to pick a really white background, but it doesn't work well actually in our own experience. What would you do? And actually some of the experience, okay, shared by some professionals and my own observation, therapists, when they are on the screen, when they are doing online counseling, they somehow are oblivious of that. So so if you see, a person or a client's pet walk across, they would say, they just let go. They just go on as usual. They didn't really talk about this. Hey, someone is passing by you. Do you think, we are right now in a private enough situation? Hey, just talk about, the passing by that pet, or even the virtual background. Therapists, if they are in-person counseling, sometimes they tend to be more sensitive to include these materials in the actual therapeutic process. But I found that therapists tend to be more oblivious about all these nuances when they are on the internet. So a lot of really potential important process material has been ignored, sometimes consciously or oftentimes unconsciously. I see it, yeah, I don't see it. Okay, it's the elephant in the room on the screen. So what have happened to us? I've observed something that is more prominent now in the online format of counseling. It's the disembodiment of counseling. It's not just the disembodiment of the client or the therapist, but the disembodiment of counseling itself. What happened is that during this time where we're acculturated to the online format altogether, we are just actually transporting our traditional theory, counseling theory, based on body-to-body interaction to the online platform. Okay, and I'm not saying in a judgmental way, but it's because of the time and all this how to say, it's important not to have clients not being able to receive services, okay, because of this COVID-19. But I found that if we are not aware or mindful, it's sometimes we treat it as it's the same, right? You just transfer what we have been, constructed in the body-to-body counseling theory directly to the online counseling work. But as I just shared with you some of the important observations, in the previous slides, there are some noticeable, differences in human experience at the virtual setting versus the in-person setting. And currently, we have done our best to try to be practical and to be convenient in terms of the transiting from the in-person counseling to online counseling. Definitely that is helping out our students to continue with their work without any delay and be able to provide necessary services to them by providing enough training to our students. I think even for us as an educator and a clinical supervisor, I also wonder, well, do we have that knowledge and experience to train our students? It's not that in the past we don't do online counseling work. I do that, but it's always the opposite, right? It's a peripheral. It's more on the ad hoc. And traditional training program never train us to do online counseling. And those who are practicing, well, we can do online counseling based upon the many experiences we already accumulated, in the body-to-body counseling, where to give up some idea already and have that, solid experience to help us to conduct quality online counseling work. But again, it's not a day-to-day thing, but what if it's almost an everyday thing? And in the past 3.5 months is the major clinical work for our students doing online, taking online psychotherapy courses. It's completely new experience. I think even for training, a lot of training programs. So what is disembodiment is that because when we are trying to literally transfer in-person counseling techniques over the internet, there's an in-connection. Just like, you only see the upper part of the body, you dress very professionally, but maybe you're just wearing slippers, or, or when you talk through the device, you tend to only use this part. Some research say that you only use the mind part, but what about the other part of the body which is not seen, that create a lack of embodiment through the interaction. There's some more distance between the therapist and the client. So I have noticed that when we are doing that, when we are just trying to transfer the technical stuff to the online counseling work, it's like only leaving the shell of counseling sometimes, And we tend to, because of the time, because of the needs of the community, sometimes have certain kind of expectation has to be compromised. And there's a lot of adjustment, a lot of refinement in the process as well. And I've seen that both therapists and clients, even myself, tend to take a more casual attitude toward using computer. I've noticed that myself even, I think it's because of the exposure. Our exposure to social network platform, is, coming out from a personal life, So when now you have to use the social network platform on a really regular professional setting, it's really hard to switch from a more personal, casual kind of style to, suddenly you have to, switch and to become more professional on social network. And at least my experience with video conferencing more is about the meeting, work meeting, even to the another extreme of over professional, then how you're going to have to make some adjustment again, because counseling relationship is not that kind of formality, because we do have that kind of closeness with our client. How to adjust, not like a business meeting with our client, just talking about thoughts process, but also getting into the psychological process. Using video conference is also another thing that we have to acculturate. And that's a question that we have to ask. How much do we, counseling psychologists in specific, do we want to force the resemblance between in-person and online counseling? Is it better to go back to online in-person counseling? Yes, you can take a look at the picture on the left. I don't know, when you see this, I'm not able to see your face. It would be very nice, to have that interaction right now. Is it better? Which one is more disembodied? This is something I asked. This is another kind of disembodiment, actually, the picture on the left, right? When the counselor mentioned about, do you feel close? I think there are two dimensions, the physical and the psychological. So it's not about online counseling, but even if we have this kind of in-person counseling in the future under the impact of COVID-19, it's still a disembodiment, okay, of counseling. So I would like to propose that maybe because of the COVID-19, because of this crisis always pushes us to change, that we don't often consciously or willingly want, okay? Maybe virtual counseling is a new culture now, and it's beginning to form, which will have its own traditions, rituals, ethics, values, and language. And when it's become more regular, okay, a culture is formed. So definitely is not the way how we call it, no more chairs, couch, but from couch to the screen, from the circle, from the group counseling circle to the screen, okay. Now counseling on the screen, maybe it's a new language. But the most important thing that I've been thinking about now, if now it's become more regular practice, it's a new culture, then how do we call it? Do we call it online counseling, virtual counseling, or more of the earlier time during the early 90s, the research called cyber counseling? Any difference? Do you see any difference whether we call it online, virtual, cyber? I don't know, okay? Do we have support to tell us? For APA, American Psychological Association, okay, in their 2013, they have guidelines, ethical guidelines for using telepsychological services. The term is telepsychological services to include broader aspect of technical use in psychological context, like text messaging, email, etc. But there's no separate section or guidelines for virtual counseling that we are doing this semester through Zoom. Zoom is this semester we're using in a very regular, almost day-to-day way, okay? What about in Chinese languages? Do you know that actually there are 3 different Chinese translations for counseling for Hong Kong, okay, for Taiwan, and for mainland China, okay? We have different Chinese translation for counseling itself. So what about, because language tells people what we do, what we don't do, and it positions us. Naming is important. I'm sure most of you in this conference would agree with that. How do we call what we are doing on the screen? Definitely new language emerges. In the traditional in-person counseling, yeah, we have a waiting room. We know what's the waiting room for, right? It's for client to come and sit there and wait for the counselor, right, to come out and to invite them to the counseling room. Now the waiting room is just what you have been waiting to get into this, okay, this presentation. You see the screen say waiting, wait for the host to get you in. This is the waiting room, okay? It's completely a different concept. Definitely it's not like, a physical waiting room, okay, for the client to wait. And that's another language I have found have probably some implicit connotation. Okay, when we do counseling in person, we close the door because of the security issue with certain software. Privacy, confidentiality is very important when we provide online counseling. It's always our priority. Okay, so when the client get invited, click to the room, then the counselor will lock the room. Sometimes the client says, let me lock the room. So what does it mean, lock the room? Okay, what is the philosophy behind counseling work? Okay, now we have to lock the room to do counseling. The greeting, okay, nice to meet you, thanks for coming today. Now it's like, can you hear me? This is our first script, especially when we meet with our first client. Okay, can you hear me? It's the script now. Or when we introduce the informed consent process to our client and say, what we say here remains in this room. When it's now on the screen, which room are you referring to? You say your room, my room, or which room? What is the boundary of privacy and confidentiality? This is something I've been thinking about, okay, during these couple of months. Because of new culture, transferring, from the traditional A culture to a B culture, like this new culture, would just even create more disembodiment. So maybe it's time for us to even reconceptualize space, presence, and boundary from four-wall space to this screen in front of us and the boundaryless virtual space. And actually, can you believe that it's 10 years ago and it's still going on? There's still debate how to define and conceptualize cyberspace. It's not a priority in our professional dialogues. Maybe it's now, if online counseling has to be provided on a very regular mainstream basis due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it is maybe the time for us to have serious discussion about that. But at the same time, even as passive as it sounds like, maybe it's also a new way for us to how to use our device in front of us, how to make it a dynamic screen. For example, I say how to adjust the distance, how to use the space, not just within the screen, but your background, how to actually include that in your psychotherapeutic process is something worth for further discussion and introspection. How to train our future counseling psychologist, clinical psychologist, counselor to provide that kind of presence on the screen. I've talked about that. So what are some implications? Definitely assessment, practice and training, risk assessment. So far, okay, virtual counseling is not a dominant service. APA actually has guidelines, okay? If client is not appropriate for online counseling due to safety issue, actually clients should be encouraged to resume face-to-face counseling. But during COVID-19, it's almost impossible, right? Because there's health risk issue. Actually, there are professionals and trainees have to conduct risk assessment that's established for people to body-to-body counseling framework. How to translate it to the online format. Let's say another way that we have to consider the ethical procedures doing it online. Do we need virtual specific administration, or even something in a longer term? not kind of survey assessment, but ways, with, or some other qualitative assessment, okay, that is appropriate, suitable, as specific for online counseling context, instead of just simply asking a client to maybe to draw something, but you cannot see the process. This is just another way of just technically transfer, but it's not specific to virtual counseling context. Perhaps it's a time for us to have some dialogues about maybe new virtual counseling theoretical models generated, maybe redefining the role of counselor and client. The role of counselor seems to be less dominant now, right? Because you don't have the control over the actual counseling room. You are in your own space, client is in your own space. You can say, oh, you change your virtual background, unless it is something, you know, there's some gender background that, you know, actually display from either side, and how are we going to handle that if it happened? But definitely there may be some need to really redefining both parties. And even for Moline, okay, she is the co-author with Yalam for the group psychotherapy textbook. It's in 5th edition. This is what we consider the Bible for conducting group counseling. And during one of the interview, you know, in the latest article that she said, there may be a need for us to have a different skill set to learn how to scan the computer with 8 faces on it, learn how to do it differently to observe group dynamics. Because of this switch is practice-based. So what I'm sharing is a practice-based. Maybe we can do more practice-based research. So is there any virtual cultural specific factors in online counseling? Not just process and outcome research in the traditional way, is more of the body-to-body interaction, but what about the virtual process and outcome? What do we know, and how is it like for the virtual therapeutic relationship? As I say, currently you see that the ethical guidelines are within 10 years in our discipline, okay, across different countries. It's still very new, and it's very general guidelines because virtual counseling is still not the normal practice in our discipline. But if it's going to be like that, like what I have been experienced in the past 3.5 months, is my new normal, okay? When there's new habit, it takes us about 40 days to build a new habit, right? Form a new habit. So 3.5 months, there's a lot of new habits and definitely new normals formed. So maybe there's some virtual psychotherapy etiquette need to be established, okay, for the new virtual counseling culture. And are we ready for this new normal? And to fill that training gap that I have mentioned earlier from our programs, okay, experience. So I would like to, through this presentation, probably first to look within us, okay, and how to have dialogue with ourselves and with others in the discipline, to reflect on what we have experienced and be proactive and innovative in the way how we approach this new culture. And I would like to end this and to probably facilitate more discussion, reflection, and feedback from you all, okay? And thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'm open for feedback, reactions, and questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pang. So let's wait for some questions on the floor, or may I ask the first question first, because before others ask some questions. So in your opinion, for the movement towards virtual counseling or online counseling, whatever, as a supervisor, what do you think about the biggest issue that
that will affect the quality of the delivery of counseling. What do you think that we must safeguard and not to let it loose, become more loose?
Yes, I think it's definitely the privacy and confidentiality.
Yeah.
It's such a dilemma. I struggle a lot when we have to have this switch, okay, and in early February, because I'm not a person very open to online counseling myself. As I say, even myself, when I do online counseling work in my own practice, I only do it on a very special circumstance. It has been like that, at least for most of our counseling psychologists. I cannot say for others, okay, because of the concern with privacy and confidentiality. But I think the COVID-19 has really challenged me, maybe I share from my own, challenged me to have a really honest look at, okay, how to find a balance, right? To uphold the quality, uphold the ethical standards that is constructed for body-to-body interaction.
Yeah.
Okay, and then to really meet the needs that our population is experiencing, they really can come in person. Okay, so I think it's about how to find a balance and how to educate our trainee to have a really transparent conversations with the client about the benefit as well as the current limitations with the online counseling, and allow the client to understand and then to make the decision. I think this is something that also one part of safeguarding the quality. Quality means we are open and allow our clients to be well informed what is entailed when it's now online. So this is something very, I have been doing a lot of this kind of psychoeducation for my students and support them to do the same thing for a client. I think that also needs some kind of psychoeducation too. Sometimes clients say, oh, it doesn't matter, right? I've been using that online with my friends, with my family, again, with the exposure, right? Because we tend to use it on the personal setting. Clients tend to transfer that expectation to the online psychotherapy context. Then I would encourage my students to be very professional, explaining the difference between online counseling and typical online conversation with your personal, in your personal life.
So Dr. Pang, may you share your experience that what kinds of counseling are more suitable for online counseling, and what kinds of situation or setting that is not very, it's not easy to adapt into the online mode?
That's a very good question. If it was COVID-19, if pre-COVID-19, I would definitely say suicidal risk, kind with suicidal risk, with violence, victims, etc. Right?
Yeah.
That's my answer.
Yeah.
That's my answer before COVID-19 crisis. But during this time, I would say we actually cannot really pick all these sort of so-called challenging cases and cases that may pertain some risk often have to be conducted online, just like I've been following through how my colleagues in the States have been doing. Okay, during their lockdown, they have their clients with suicidal risk. They have no choice. They have no choice how to conduct suicide risk assessment online. In the past, before COVID-19 would not have happened, we would have encouraged our client to come for in-person. But because it's not just not talking about virtual counseling itself, but virtual counseling interact with this pandemic issue. When physical mobility may be quite risky and not possible for our community members to receive services.
So, Dr. Pang, we received 5 questions from the floor, so maybe
Okay,
I
sure,
respond a little bit. There are 5 in total, and the first
that's
one is
great.
from Martin, and Martin's question is there any new possibility, or because of the new digital tools, can we think of new models that overcome the previous limitation of therapy that must be restricted to on-site modes? So his question is, how can we rethink therapy with digital tools? I guess it's a very big question, isn't it?
Yes, I'm trying to read that. That's a very good question. I think there are 2 questions, right, in a row, right? Let's see. You know what? I have to say that the answer is I don't quite know, but definitely the rethinking is a must. We have been we have been socializing the body-to-body interaction. Our theory has been based upon that. So our normal reaction is to, of course, how to assimilate that to our familiar aspect. So I think in terms of how to rethink therapy in with digital tools is to, I think I've mentioned about even have to reconceptualize what space is, what relationship is in virtual counseling. And so far there's not a lot of research, at least from our discipline, to really take a more bottom-up perspective to really, I think from the really fundamental aspect, looking at what human relationship is online. I think the tools is one thing, but I think it's not really just about the tools. I found that during these 3 months, certainly we can refine the tools to when more therapists are using it more, there will be more business, right, to create more secure model for it. But I think it's about conceptualization, how we understand online therapy. I hope that addressed your question. If not, let me know.
So let's move on. Other questions, or there are more questions coming. So one question is, in your opinion, how to develop students' competency and confidence of using these devices in counseling?
Yes, 2 things that we have been doing. First, is we actually come up with our own standard and guidelines for online counseling. Okay, we have some resources from APA, from some of the major psychological association to get some of the ethical guidelines and to add on more practical aspect. That's one thing. So to set up the online counseling guidelines for trainees, that's very important. That is the framework, okay? We do provide some readings for them before they are allowed to conduct counseling online. Second is the role play, actually. Again, because traditional counseling training based upon body-to-body interaction, as I mentioned, can you imagine we do role play practice in the breakout room? How do you teach counseling skill in a breakout room, right? It's very interesting. So the second thing about how to build up their competence is they have to do online counseling role play. But it makes sense, right? For traditional counseling, you do micro skills practice, body to body. For online, they also have to get used to, okay, how do I look when I look at these screens and what my role play partner react, feel, and record it, and we receive feedback. One of the things that's very unique to online counseling is we get to see clearly of the supervisee facial expression, which if it's from the in-person practice would not be able to provide that because it's always angled. So they do receive a lot of practice and feedback for the practice before they go on. And second, as I think it's a lot of psychological preparation, the competencies, not just about the skills. Am I prepared to be able to put my professional hat on, and I'm more familiar with the personal usage of online communication? I found that some of students, especially of the younger generation, they may not have been able to build that clear boundary, and that takes some supervision, okay, process to help them, to support them to perform professionally on this kind of virtual setting.
There are many. There are still many questions.
Yes.
So, would you mind I summarize some of those questions in the same group, so we answer it one by one? And
yeah,
some questions are talking about some logistic problem, for example, how to deliver the counseling process in detail. But I guess one of the question is interesting, because they ask about using the technology may be difficult for those with a lower socioeconomic status or something like this.
Yes.
Difficult problem.
Yes.
But would it be new trends that because we don't necessary for us to rent a room and to rent a counseling center or be restricted by the government licensing issue? It would be a new possibility using this Zoom technology, but what is the limit of this new possibility? So in your opinion, can you share a little bit?
You mean using Zoom alone? The limitation of using Zoom alone?
Yeah.
There have been some discussion with some group of practitioners using different kind of softwares, right? I think Skype is the first generation, but Skype actually, in terms of comparison of technology, is very unstable. I've tried that actually myself. Zoom is just really because of COVID-19. I have really few experience with Zoom before, but it's more on a training ground, right? It's not therapy, okay? And it was different a couple of years ago. Zoom has advanced their settings, okay, just within this COVID-19 period of time. So it's a very different kind of experience. I think I would say I like the setting. It gives a lot of different kind of functions. For example, you can have waiting room, which Skype, you cannot do it, okay? And you can really lock the room. Just, but for Skype, you just have to start your conversation without all these extra setting. And sometimes this extra setting, to be honest, does help to give a sense of professionalism, to be honest. Skype cannot, right? You start and then you end. But okay, let me lock the room. Let me put you in the waiting room. So it's very simulated now with the in-person. I'm not saying the same, okay? Okay, the limitation with Zoom and with other kind of software, again, would be the internet access. Okay, this is something is particularly difficult for both parties. And renting rooms is, I actually had some supervisors have to, if they know someone, okay, have an extra office and they feel comfortable and willing, then they would, when they do their counseling or with my supervision, they will actually went to that office to have that to have the Zoom supervision or session. I think it's not I think Zoom itself is very diverse in terms of setting, but again, it's the internet and also the privacy and, that the safety concern that you have been reading on the media. And we chose to train a student to be very transparent and open about this, and even have an open dialogue with that if they have any questions about that, okay, and address any concern, how we do our best, to the best knowledge of the of the internet technology to provide that safe, secure feeling about doing online counseling. Yeah.
So seems that we have to finish. Okay. But is there more time for one questions? Okay, one more questions.
Oh, sure.
Okay, question from Paul Rose is an interesting question because he talked about some Merleau-Ponty's idea that about body, and
yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
And his body in therapy. For example, I just think of, for example, mindfulness training mindfulness, and some. It seems that it's very difficult to use Zooms to use mindfulness technique or something like this. So, but is there anything that we can accommodate a little bit or try to?
Yes, I thank you, Paul. I think I've read some of the article from Ponty's, and that's why I've been thinking about even re-theorize how we do counseling. Okay, generally there are two parties of counseling, more focused on the cognitive part, the mind part, versus the relational experiential part. I think what Dr. Fu mentioned is the experiential psychotherapy, right? Like mindfulness, client-centered focusing, and somatic, that kind of branches. Okay, so I've been thinking that actually because of the Zoom and the mediated space, maybe incorporating more, investigating more of the using the body sensation, the body reaction to facilitate that psychological process would be actually more important than body-to-body psychotherapy.
Okay. So seems that we have to go now. So
okay,
thank you.
Sure. I know that you're busy. Have to look at Yeah.
So thank you.
So
yes.
Thank you so much. Yes.
So maybe we can contact Dr. Pang through email so that we can have more dialogues about our thinking about psychology of global crisis and new challenges and new opportunities of technologies like Zoom or some online interfaces. So thank you very much for coming.
Yes,
and thanks, Dr. Pang, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, you all. Yeah, guys have been asking very good questions. Yeah, thank you. My pleasure to present here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.